Growing up, the only experience I had with anime was Cheese TV. My brothers mainly watched it, I would only watch it if there was nothing else on. I do remember loving Cardcaptor Sakura, and being really annoyed with them replaying the same episode of Dragon Ball where Goku runs on a giant cloud dragon in the sky over and over and over again. I also remember enjoying bits and pieces of Yu-Gi-Oh! As for One Piece, frankly, my history of One Piece until 2023 is basically non-existent. Bits and pieces at best. I remember the pirate rap, and the main character Luffy being on an island with lots of women, and occasionally I would see One Piece pop up on Twitter. Something big would be happening in the story. One involved these weird snails that are projectors for a TV screen suddenly all over the world airing something. Then I saw something about Gear 5. I clicked on it not understanding what it was, saw that it was One Piece and thought never mind and moved on. I honestly didn't like One Piece. I thought it was too silly and too childish. My initial thought to the live action adaptation really shows my stance well. It's just gonna be another horrible Netflix adaptation. At the very least, it's just a kids show that's being milked for money. I think primarily because it was popular, I had no desire to watch One Piece. Not in any shape, form, nor even rate it. I felt too good for One Piece. Now, with that type of hot take, you're probably thinking, why did I watch it? Before I flew across the world, literally one day before, I was at an arcade with a friend playing Sound Vortex and Beatmania. On the way out, we were walking past some crane machines and I saw a plush of a character that looked strangely familiar. I was trying hard to pinpoint it. I just assumed it was from Guilty Gear because, honestly, I don't know. I just knew so little of Guilty Gear and I knew fighting games had mascot characters, so I just figured it would have been from that. My friend then pointed out to me it was from One Piece. That character was Chopper. The next day I jumped on the plane and I flew for probably about 20 hours straight all the way to America. By the time I landed, it was really late, so my friend picked me up and took me to grab some food. While we were chatting, he was telling me about how he watched the One Piece live action with his friend, and was telling me how good it was, how it was actually extremely faithful to the original story, how the creator Oda got the final say on everything, and even better, our friend who is really big into One Piece absolutely loved it. I was slightly more interested, slowly coming around to the idea, but I was still hesitant about watching it. Once we got back to his place, he suggested to put it on and have a few drinks. Honestly, I was expecting to pass out, but I was captivated and I didn't know why. Now, just for context, I don't remember much of these episodes because I only watched them once and it was while I was in America. And as of writing this, that was a little over a year ago. I do plan to rewatch it and I am saving that for a future video. And I'm also not going to be doing an in-depth review here. I'm only mentioning the things that grabbed me, and because of this, I'm skipping over a lot. I'm treating this like you, the watcher, have seen the show, know these characters and the lore. If you haven't, feel free to keep watching, but I do apologize if this sounds a bit over the place. This point on is just a lot of rambling. Getting into it, I was taken aback by the designs of everything. Everything looked really anime. That's not a bad thing, it's just surprising because usually they try to dial it back and make characters look less cartoony, remove colour hair, crazy outfit designs and so on. But from what my friend was telling me, all the character designs were accurate to the source material, and I believed them because they sure looked like it. Thankfully, it didn't take me too long to get used to it. And what helped was when we met Luffy. Funnily enough, I actually thought that he was going to be a quirky, quippy character. He was talking to a bird in the first moment we see him. But thankfully I was wrong, because he is actually really captivating. He absolutely captivated me the second we got on board with the Avita Pirates. I was expecting him to be weak and overly obnoxious, but no, just seeing how he acted, how he held himself in confidence, every scene he was in was handled the exact same. He completely owned every single one, and his charisma was just infectious. I was slowly starting to warm up to him, and it just kept me watching. Once we got to Zoro, he definitely screamed your average anime swordsman, edgy and serious. I honestly thought he was going to be my favorite character, primarily because the 3 sword style looked way cooler than I ever gave it credit for growing up. Nami was interesting, but I felt her annoying and unlikable. She was interesting as a thief when she was doing her own thing, but I felt she was way more fun when she played ball with Luffy and Zoro. Like, I saw chemistry there, but I just wasn't feeling it for a long time. I did like her stuff though. The lore drops in the second episode is when I started to get more interested in the story of the world itself. I found myself honestly way more interested in the Marines, way more than the Straw Hats at this point. The Marines weren't perfect as we were led to believe, and Garp knows this, so seeing him work alongside Koby was a great pairing. And especially when Helmeppo was reintroduced, I honestly thought he was a one and done character. The flashbacks also added more context to the Devil Fruits, how they're rare and each have their own power. And they explained if you eat one, you can't swim, which makes sense why Luffy can't swim because he ate the Gomu Gomu fruit. Honestly, I'm quite easy to win over, so this was enough for me. I really like the idea of the Devil Fruits and that there are different ones out there in the world besides just the Gomu Gomu fruit. Funnily enough, we actually get to see this with Buggy the Clown. Turns out this Joker wannabe is actually really cool and interesting. I love his Devil Fruit powers and how he really leaned into this clown stereotype. Not because he wants to, in the sense of, I love clowns, I want to be a clown. But more so, what if I were to dress up as a clown to hide my red nose? Plus, it was really interesting seeing that connection Luffy and Buggy had. Not just these two people having a Devil Fruit, but the connection with Shanks. Shanks is the reason why Luffy has the straw hat and why he became a pirate, and is indirectly why Luffy ate the Devil Fruit, making him the man he is today. He is Luffy's idol figure, and seeing Buggy dislike this man and even feel bad for Luffy as if Shanks wronged him was really interesting to me. The dynamic between these two were fantastic. I also liked how they used the seawater as a way to torture Luffy. I thought that was really clever, and honestly, I was on the edge of my seat. I had no clue how he was going to get out of it. At this point, I was just in it for the ride. I was surprised that I was getting more and more invested, and a lot of the opinions I had earlier were basically gone at this point. I never understood the point of being king of the pirates, but the more Luffy said it, with more and more conviction and confidence behind it, it slowly started to put a dumb smile on my face. I was starting to believe that he could actually become king of the pirates. Usopp is an interesting character. While I do think he was annoying at times, underneath his cowardice and lies was a heart of gold. I remember liking him and his chemistry with Luffy a lot. They bounced off each other greatly. I also remember really enjoying the relationship between him and Kaya, and I found it really sweet. Usopp trying his best to cheer her up with his lies while she was sick in bed alone. And I also liked the dynamic those two had with Kuro. Kuro I really loved. He was such a sweetheart, kind person and just wonderful to watch. He was stern, but it felt like he really cared about Kaya. It honestly seemed like he didn't care that much about Usopp in the sense of, sure, he doesn't want him there, but I'm sure he wouldn't say no to Kaya. These three really stole these two episodes for me. For a show about pirates, it really didn't feel like it, and I mean that in a good way. I was never big into pirates growing up, so I was worried that this would just be a typical pirate show. And I'm glad I was wrong, and these episodes helped a lot. It felt like a fairy tale story of a princess trapped in a castle, deathly ill, with only her one friend to lean on. It was just so much fun going through these episodes and seeing how all these characters developed between each others and the Straw Hats. And somehow, I was still on the edge of my seat. Normally, I can see twists coming a mile away, but not this time. I genuinely never expected Kuro to be a captain of a pirate crew. I also somehow didn't think Luffy would eat all the poison soup. I mean, hindsight is 20/20, of course he would, but I mean, come on, it's blue. But it was great. Luffy was out of the action for a while, so we could see Usopp, Nami, Kaya, and Zoro in the limelight. I really had no clue how they were going to get out of the situation. I mean, Kaya didn't believe Usopp about Kuro. Zoro was stuck in a well. The only person we had to rely on was Nami, who was busy looking after Kaya, and then the Marines show up and take Luffy. There were so many great character moments and developments in these episodes, and it was around these ones that I started to see why people liked it. I could see why people would be interested in these characters and these stories and the world it's in. A good example of this is my opinion on Zoro in these last few episodes. At this point, I was losing interest with him. He felt very one-note at this point, but this backstory helped a lot, and once I realized that the sword he puts in his mouth is Kuina's, I knew there was more to Zoro than meets the eye. Initially, I was just watching it because my friend was showing me it. If we didn't continue to watch it, then I wouldn't be complaining. I still wasn't overly invested in it. However, there is one scene that changed my tune, and that was Garp being revealed to be Luffy's grandfather. While I enjoyed the Straw Hats at this point, truthfully I still had no interest in them. They were fun and interesting, but nothing captivated me. I was way more invested in the dynamic between Garp and Luffy. I just wanted to see them, two different ideologies related by blood, and how their relationship would evolve. If I continued for anything, it'd be this, to see them meet again. And at this point, if I was satisfied with the live action, maybe I'd check out season 2 whenever that come out, assuming it wouldn't be cancelled. Which, I mean, let's be fair, I think everyone thought this was going to be cancelled. But beyond that, I still had no interest in the anime, the games, or the manga. One of the changes that my friend pointed out to me was about one character called Don Krieg. Originally, he was going to fight against the Straw Hats at the Baratie, be the big bad for the arc. But here, they changed it into someone else. Initially, I was quite disappointed by this, but then, as my friend pointed out, they still incorporated his character into the show. Mihawk, the warlord Garp called to go after Luffy, actually defeated Krieg and his pirate crew in his introduction scene. And later down the track, I found out that this scene was taken from the original source material. Don Krieg was fought and defeated by Mihawk in the exact same situation. This time, we actually got to see it, rather than it just being talked about. So, while Don Krieg isn't the big bad of the Baratie arc, he's still introduced, given the same backstory and respect as he deserves. This really made me happy because it shows even if the show is going in a slightly different direction and not being one-to-one with the original story, it still pays respect to the original material. I mean, the fact that the scene itself is 2 minutes long, however Krieg himself is only on screen for around a minute, the fact that they went through all that effort just for a 2-minute scene is why I love this adaptation so much. Would it have been nice to see the original story play out in live action? I'm sure a lot of people would have liked it, yeah, but the fact remains he was adapted, cast, and respected by the source material rather than just being completely written out just for the sake of it. Most adaptations wouldn't do anything like that. At best, a name drop. Going back to Mihawk, he is this really mysterious but powerful character. I love his sword attack that can cut a ship in half. It blew my mind when I saw it. I never expected to see anything like that in this. And him fighting Zoro was such a fantastic scene. It shows that while he is a pirate and a warlord, which already someone with that title you'd think absolutely threatening and dangerous, he is actually reasonable and respectful. He fights Zoro properly, respectfully, and even encourages him to continue fighting and training so one day they may battle again. And on top of that, while he was sent after Luffy, he decides to let him go despite being sent by Garp. He's definitely not your typical pirate like the ones we've seen previously. Continuing on, we're introduced to two new characters, Zeff and Sanji. Zeff is the lead cook, the boss of the restaurant and a father figure to Sanji. And Sanji is a charismatic sous chef, serious but kind-hearted, and he's a big flirt. Sanji's introduction is absolutely fantastic. In such a small time frame, it shows us all of his traits. He shows us that he won't take anything from customers who are disturbing the peace and especially wasting food. He initially tries to persuade the two characters Full Body and Galley with the offers of free food and drinks in return for calming down. They don't take the offer, so he very quickly shuts down the entire situation by kicking them both to the ground. I absolutely love the way Sanji fights, where he just focuses all of his attacks from his legs, keeping his hands free for whatever, or in this situation, a plate holding some bread. After that, he goes back to his usual routine of serving customers and immediately meets the Straw Hats, and specifically Nami, as he starts to be more respectful and flirtatious with her while being more blunt and sharp with the rest of the crew. I typically hate flirtatious characters in any medium. I just find it annoying and it slows the plot down just for one-note scenes that don't add any value. The only character I've liked that actually does flirt fairly often is Captain Jack Harkness from Doctor Who. I find that it works for him because he is constantly teased about it and it isn't his primary personality trait. Plus, the majority of his flirts are comedic, usually by timing and scene context. And that's just ignoring in general how charismatic and charming Jack is. Initially, I thought Sanji would just be another one-note flirtatious character that I was going to have to get used to, and I am so happy to say that he's just another Captain Jack Harkness. He flirts, but the most important part, it's charming, charismatic, and absolutely isn't his primary personality trait. Sanji absolutely nails each scene he is in. He stole the whole show so many times. Whether it's him interacting with the Straw Hats, the Baratie staff, Zeff, or just random people, he just carries himself in such a way that you can't help but smile. I think the best example is when he talks to Luffy about his dream, the All Blue, a place where the four seas meet, a place where every fish from every corner of the world can be found, a cook's paradise. It's such a fantastic scene. You can see his inner child jump out and the excitement beaming across his face. And the way he talks about his dream, he talks about a trace of doubt in it. If anything, it's probably more accurate to say that he believes it's reality, that it isn't something fictitious but something real, undoubtedly real. Which is why it's so heartbreaking that he shuts it out, ignores it, because of his own personal debt he believes he has to chef for saving his life as a kid. While Sanji is treating Zoro, who got a minor flesh wound from fighting Mihawk, it's revealed that Zeff had his own pirate crew and attacked the ship Sanji, as a kid, was a cook on. Despite hiding from the chaos, Sanji stood up against Zeff when he insulted the dish he made. They both threatened each other, and Sanji said he wasn't going to die until he found the All Blue. Suddenly, a strong wave came and sunk the ship they were on. Zeff and Sanji were stranded on a giant rock, hanging over the sea with a giant drop down into the ocean. They had no shelter, no way to fish, and no food. All they had were a few bags Zeff took from the ship. Zeff gave Sanji a small bag and told him to go to the opposite side of the rock and to leave him alone until help came. Sanji was upset as Zeff had a bigger bag, and Zeff pointed out how he needed it because he was bigger than him. Sanji rationed his food, which only lasted over a month, and a few weeks went by, and at this point he was completely starving, so he grabbed a weapon and went to Zeff's side of the rock to steal his food. The bag Zeff had was never opened. Sanji stabbed it and all that came out was treasure. There was no other bag of food. Sanji had all the food on the island. The only thing Zeff had was himself. It was revealed that Zeff cut his leg off and consumed it in an act of self-cannibalization to survive. Sanji, confused, wanted to know why Zeff would do such a thing, and Zeff told Sanji he did it because they both shared the same dream. Zeff figured Sanji would have a higher chance of surviving, so he put his faith and his dream to find the All Blue in Sanji. We then return to the present. The Baratie gets attacked by pirates again. This time, they're fishermen. Arlong, the pirate captain, demands the Grand Line map that Nami stole from the Marines in the first episode, and Luffy declines. They fight, and Arlong wins. Nami then takes the Grand Line map from the Going Merry and returns to him. It's revealed she too is a fishman pirate and was only with them for the map. Arlong throws Luffy into the water and leaves the Baratie with Nami. Sanji then dives into the water and rescues Luffy. They both return to Zoro, who awakes from his coma and commits himself to Luffy. Sanji then joins the crew and tearfully parts ways with Zeff, thanking him for saving his life. The crew then sail after Arlong and Nami. Sanji is such a fun character to watch. Whether it's him talking, cooking or fighting, it's a fantastic time no matter what, especially with the chemistry between him and the Straw Hats. I also find him extremely similar to myself. He puts his friends, his family, people who are in need before himself, no matter the situation. He's always willing to give someone a chance even if other people aren't as likely to. I absolutely love these two episodes, and you might have been thinking there's a lot more information I've given, a lot more detail, and a lot more story elements. And you're right, because truth be told, these episodes are why I wanted to make this in the first place. These episodes sold me on One Piece. In the context of my trip to America, while I was watching these last few episodes, I've been awake for hours watching them. I can't remember if it was the next night or it was the same night I landed. But all I remember is being so exhausted and tired, actively forcing myself to stay awake because I was so shocked and invested. I always thought One Piece was a kids show, and this isn't that. I never expected anything like this at all, and I'm so glad I didn't because I don't think I would have cared as much if I knew beforehand. I knew there was something more to One Piece after seeing this. After experiencing that backstory, I wanted to see more. I wanted to see Sanji develop further as a character and see him find the All Blue. I'll be honest, while I liked the previous episodes before Sanji was introduced, I just didn't have much to say outside of a brief rundown of the characters and my initial impression. And this applies even more to these next two episodes. I've honestly forgotten the most out of them, so forgive me for being a tad brief. I enjoyed the backstory of Nami and village and family, how Arlong came in and took over, killed Nami's mum, tons of villages, and basically destroying her entire village, and seeing Nami give herself up to Arlong, drawing maps for him, also she could get close to him to make a deal with him that if she got 100 million berry, he'd sell the village, the people, everything to her. And how the Marines were corrupt enough to let Arlong do all this and side with him because of money. and when Nami had all the money needed, only for the Marines to steal it on behalf of Arlong. Seeing her betrayed, her last hope completely burnt out, with a constant reminder of everything done to her, her family, her village, tattooed on her skin, was absolutely gut-wrenching. Which made it extra special when Luffy came around to Nami and offered to help her save her village with the help of all the friends she made in the Straw Hat crew, despite her betraying them previously. I don't remember much of the fight scene, but I do remember Luffy destroying the room that Nami was forced to draw maps in as a kid, and Nami standing there, watching it all. I really enjoyed Arlong as a villain, and I really enjoyed seeing him get beat by Luffy during this fight, and Nami was a standout in these episodes. I went from disliking her, thinking she was annoying, to really enjoying her as a character, finally understanding why she was the way she was in the early episodes. It's because she had the weight of her whole world upon her shoulders and couldn't trust anyone but herself. Now she can. I really enjoyed the last few scenes. I'm glad we got to see Garp and Luffy finally meet personally and duke it out. I loved how Garp, while he defeats Luffy, lets him go because he saw how determined and happy Luffy was, showing that Garp respects him, not just as a grandson, but as a pirate. But my favorite scene would have to be the bounties being flown out, and all the past characters we've met from Kaya to Zeff, from Alvida to Shanks himself. And the scene where they officially form the Straw Hat crew, and every single one of them declare their dreams and ambitions together. Before I left to fly back home, I had a chat to my friend about how great the show was, and how excited I was for a potential Season 2, hoping it wouldn't get cancelled. Funnily enough, during my stay in America, Season 2 was confirmed. And him and I had the same idea. We'll watch the anime. He was dedicated to the full run, which was quite surprising to hear because, like me, he wasn't interested in One Piece until he watched the adaptation himself. I was initially dedicated to watching what the live action covered, specifically the East Blue Saga, the first 44 episodes. But then I found out there was one last arc in the saga that wasn't adapted in the first season. Loguetown, the arc right before they reached the Grand Line. So I figured, I'll do the first 53 episodes, and if I like it, maybe I'll continue watching otherwise. It'll be nice having a taste of what's to come in the live action, then I'll rewatch the live action for comparison. But if you noticed, I said I only watched the live action once, and it's also why I didn't rewatch the last 2 episodes, because I wanted to save it until I saw the anime version. How come it's taken me over a year, and still counting, to watch 53 episodes and rewatch 8 episodes? Well, let's just say I became a massive One Piece fan. Those 53 episodes turned into 100, 200, 300, and so on and so forth until I caught up with the manga. One Piece is a world, a story that has taken over my life in the best of ways. There are so many things I want to talk about thanks to it, from how it has impacted my life, my hot takes, to theories, and maybe even doing something similar to this, but with the anime instead. I think the live action is the best way to get into One Piece. It's shorter, more condensed, packed with even more story, primarily being added story elements from the later arcs. I consider this to be a sort of second draft of the East Blue Saga. Take everything that was introduced later on and reincorporate it into the start. It gives the viewer a better understanding of not just the world, but the characters, the direction, and what to expect. And honestly, if it wasn't for Garp being introduced as Luffy's grandfather way early in the story than in the source material, I don't think I would have cared as much as I did while watching, because that was the only thing keeping me invested until I met Sanji. And I know that if I was watching this by myself, with the ability to stop whenever I wanted, Garp would have kept me watching. Yet, if he wasn't there, I would have turned it off by that same episode, because that's what I felt while watching it. I hope you can tell that I went from being someone that had absolutely no interest in One Piece to being a massive fan. I absolutely loved every second of it, and I still want more. The One Piece truly is real.